In the last video, I showed you how to grant someone access to only a specific resource, like a data set or a table. When you use this approach, it's not possible to see every single person or principal who you've granted access to. And the reason is because when I add someone to a data set at that data set's permissions level or a table, and then I navigate to my project level IAM screen, I don't see that access granted in that master project level screen. The only way for me to keep track of everyone I've granted access to is to click through every single resource and view its sharing settings. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a second approach to limiting access to your data, which is to use dataset tags. The benefit of dataset tags is they do allow you to manage everyone who you've granted access to at the project level IAM screen. But the downside of this approach is that you can only go as deep as the dataset level, and you cannot use them to grant access to a specific table within a dataset. So to get started, I'm back in my BigQuery IAM example, and I have completely removed all of Tobias's access. So you can see he can no longer view any data sets in the BigQuery IAM example project. Now what we're going to do is we're going to give Tobias access only to a single data set, but we're going to choose a different data set this time. Instead of the Google Analytics data, I'm going to give him access to the user data set. We're going to do that using tags. So to go access your tags, you go to IAM and admin and you select tags. Here you'll have an option to create a new tag. So if you click create, window pops up. And what you do with tags is you create key value pairs. Now, one thing to know about using tags on BigQuery data is you can only apply one key for each tag that you create to one data set. So what I like to do is create a tag where I'm granting access to mutually exclusive groups. Nobody will be able to receive multiple values of that tag. So in our example, I'm going to create a tag here. I'm going to call this data sharing settings. And let's say there are internal teams who only need access to certain types of data, but they will never cross over one another. So in other words, I've got the finance team, and I've got another team that I'm going to add Tobias to. Let's call it the internal BI team. And Tobias is never going to need access to the financial data, so this should be fine. So I'm going to create the tag key. The next thing that I'm going to do is navigate to BigQuery and apply that tag to the data set that I want to grant access to. To do that, you'll click on the data set, and in the window that pops up, you'll have an edit details option. When you click there, you'll see an option to enable expiration, add a description, label it, and of course, add your tags. Now, when you click on the little arrow, you'll see that you can choose a scope. I said at the very beginning of this series that there are a few things that I'll show you that you can only do if your project lives within an organization. One of those things is to apply tags to your different data sets across all of the projects in your organization. This is a really handy feature for a large enterprise that has lots of projects. For our case today, we're going to keep this very simple. We're just going to create a tag in this project, and the scope we select will be tags within this project. So I will select the current project, and now you can see I choose a key and a value. The only key that I've created is the one we just set up, data sharing settings. And now I've got a requirement. I have to say which value should apply to this data set. I've already decided this is a data set that my internal BI team needs access to and not the finance team. So I'm going to add that tag and click Save. The last thing to do is to add Tobias so that he can be a BigQuery editor and user of any data set in this project that has the internal BI team tag. So to do that, it's just like we showed in some of the early videos. We go to your Identity Access Management screen, we click Grant Access, we add Tobias as the principal, and then we start selecting roles. Since I've been using BigQuery Data Editor and User, they're already at the top. What we're doing different now is we are adding a condition, and that condition is going to be, I'm going to call it Dataset Access, and we're going to use it as a resource condition type and tag. You can do this a couple of ways. You can see I can grant Tobias access to everything under a key, or I can choose a value. Now, I like to use the value ID because it prevents me from making any typos. I can just copy and paste the ID of the value and the key into these fields here. The way to do that is to duplicate your tab, navigate back over to tags, and then you can click, you got to select your project. You can click on the tag that you've created, and you can see here I've got everything I need. So at the top of the window, I've got my tag key ID, and then I have a tag value ID for each of the values. So you simply copy this, paste it into the key ID field, copy the value ID for the internal BI team, paste it into the value ID field. Now I will save that, save the project, and next thing to do is to test this. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give Tobias a link directly to the data set that we've just given him access to, and see if he's able to open and view it. And there we go. So he can see the data set info. He can actually see the user data here. He can also see other things. I don't know why that is. So let's go back. I made a mistake. I have given him too much access. Let's take a look at this and see what I did wrong. So first of all, I'm going to make sure my tag is correct. I've given him access to the internal BI team tag. Now I'm going to navigate back to IAM and admin, and I can already see what I did wrong. So I have given him a condition on the BigQuery Data Editor role, but I did not apply that condition to the BigQuery user role. Whoops. So I'm going to go back. Okay, so hopefully that corrects the issue. Let's update the policy, navigate back to Tobias's window, do a refresh, and you'll notice that with Google Cloud Platform, because of caching, there is a little bit of a delay when you make a change like this. So I can still actually see these other tables. Sometimes what you can do is a hard refresh to clear the cache and eliminate those. Perfect, there we go. The last thing that you'll want to do is run a query against this. And I can already see, if you're very attentive, that there's going to be a problem with that. At the top of the page, it's asking me to select a project. Because I removed Tobias from the second project that we had created before, he no longer has access to that one. He also no longer has access to the project BigQuery IAM example. Even though we just added him at the project level, he still has very similar access to what we showed before, in that he cannot bill queries against a project. So if I try and run a query, I'm just going to write a very simple one where we select email from the user table. We will see the same error that we saw before. Use the project picker at the top of the page to choose a project. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to the BigQuery BI billing project I created before. and I'm going to add Tobias here as a BigQuery editor. Now, again, this is only a challenge if you're granting access to someone who has no other Google Cloud access. In the case of Tobias, he doesn't use Google Cloud. He uses a BI tool, so he probably doesn't. I'm going to add him again as the BigQuery data user as well so that he can run jobs. BigQuery user. I'm going to save that. If I was being very careful, I would add an expiration date. But for this example, I'm just going to go quickly. We're going to refresh the page. And now Tobias will be able to see that he has a project that he can choose from under the Kin-Williams organization. Well, sometimes it takes a second. In order to get around the Google Cloud caching issues, sometimes I like to close the tab and open a new one. Not enough. There we go. So now BigQuery BI billing shows up. That's the project that I want to use. I'm going to go into my SQL workspace, and I can still see I have access to the BigQuery IAM example project, but all I can see is the user data because that is the tag I've been granted access to. At this point, I should be able to run a query with no problem. I've got access to the data. I've got access to a project where I can be billed against. So I'm going to simply run this quick query, and everything works as expected. I've just covered a whole lot of information, but the summary is that there are a couple of ways that you can make sure someone only has access to specific subsets of your data. The first thing that I showed you was to navigate to the dataset or table settings and grant permissions at that level. The second thing I showed you was how to create a tag, group your datasets under a tag, and then grant access to all of the datasets that tag covers. Now, the benefit of the first approach, applying those permissions at the table or dataset level, is you can get very granular. It's the only way to give someone access to a specific table. However, the benefit of dataset tags is it's just easier to manage who has access to what. You can just navigate to your project level IAM window, and you can see a list of everyone who has access to your BigQuery data next to what tags they have, dataset tags they have access to. So if you've got a lot of people you're managing, you really probably are better off going with dataset tags rather than managing very granular permissions. The next thing that I'm going to show you is how to create views so that you can grant a user access to the results of a query without actually granting them access to the underlying data.